Good day, everyone, and welcome to the Human Development Zone. Today we are at the Pan-African Parliament, where we are attending the African Youth Development Summit, brought to us by the African Peer Review Mechanism and JCI. So today I have an important guest. How are you, sir?
I'm good. How are you, sir?
I'm all right. Tell us your name and what you do.
Okay.
Yes.
My name is Vuyisile Mshudulu. And what I do is, firstly, I love, and there's a lot I'm involved in, but particularly in the creative sector. I've always worked in the creative sector.
Wow.
So that's one of the things. But I'm a policy maker as well.
Wow.
So policy making is one of my strengths.
Uh-huh.
And I also worked a lot in project management. So
Wow.
those are my interests.
Interesting. You know, I mean, take 20 years ago, if you had said you're in the creative space, people would have frowned on you, like almost like they frown on people who do philosophy. But now, I mean, going into the fourth industrial revolution and all the automation, creativity is at the center. Are you ready to be the most relevant person in the world?
Innovation, creativity, design certainly have become more fashionable, and they are concepts that are used, more frequently, and people have a different perception. Like you said, if it was 20 years ago, people would have had a different perception of what those constitute and what they mean in terms of everyday life. Without understanding the impact of what creativity and innovation has in everyday life. I mean, everything we do is a consequence of innovation and creativity. Even us, our existence and our being at the essence of who we are is creativity, innovation, and so on. So all those factors are very important in how we rediscover ourselves. I heard you mentioning a very controversial concept called the fourth industrial revolution. and I also heard it was mentioned in the plenary. I always ask the question, when we say the fourth industrial revolution, what periodization are we referring to?
I don't know.
Is it a European periodization? Is it an African periodization? Or is it a global periodization? And if it is global, how was it determined? Because as Africans, we have had a lot of industrial revolutions and more than 4. So if we say it's the fourth, it's very questionable for
But
me.
you know what? Funny enough, I had a speaker recently who I interviewed, and they were saying, no, Africa is actually in the second revolution, because we're talking about beneficiation, black industrialists. So maybe we are actually at the stage where England was in 1300. That was someone else's view. What do you think of that?
You see, one could also argue that Africa was where England has never been. And then it becomes very difficult to juxtapose or to do a comparative analysis. Because, you see, our analysis is always based on our conditioning. And sometimes, I was just saying to a colleague in the plenary that the concepts that are used to define the approach for African solutions is a Eurocentric one. And once we rely on Eurocentric concepts and definitions and approaches to resolve our problems, it creates a disjuncture, and we never really achieve what is accustomed or what is customized to our problems. So our solutions will never be as effective as they should be. So my challenge is then that once we awaken the Eurocentric conditioning in ourselves, we put to sleep the African creativity that we have within us. And it is that we need to resolve the African problems. It is very bizarre for Africans to come together and rely on a European format to resolve their own problems.
It's unnatural.
It is, yeah.
Okay, so, and then I read another interesting article where we as Africans have had concepts like Ubuntu. We have always been sharing, a child is not just the child of the parents, but the child of the village. And you find that the business models that are being called disruptive and innovative in Europe are just emphasizing Ubuntu. Like, for example, Uber, ride sharing, Airbnb, this food, what, you know. So it's almost like we as Africans are trying to catch up, in quotes, right? Catch up with the Europeans by being individualistic, living our Ubuntu, whilst the Europeans are trying to be Ubuntu like us. Okay. I don't know. What can you say?
You see, the Europeans are benefiting from the status quo. The dislocation and the dysfunction of Africans is of benefit to the Europeans. So it is really unthinkable to expect that they will provide us with the tools to eradicate our dysfunction and to relocate ourselves to our essence. So, for example, the education that we get, which is a Eurocentric construct,
the
education that we get promotes individual excellence.
True.
Which is alien to our communal way of living, which is central to Ubuntu. Ubuntu is really about communal living, understanding that you exist because there are others, and others exist because you are you. You know, so it is really about coexistence. But what we rely on and what we aspire to is the very education that promotes individual excellence. You know, and erodes the essence of our communal ways of doing things. Collectivism, you know, all of those noble African concepts get eroded through the education that we are provided by the very Europeans who are adopting our own ways of doing things and now implementing them to their own advancement.
For profit.
Exactly.
So tell me, I mean, platforms like the African Youth Development Summit, how do they help in understanding and where we're coming from, what we need to do in order to actually emancipate ourselves?
It is always important to have platforms where Africans come together to determine how they can interact with the world. The only shortfall is that we are not interacting with the world on our own terms or on terms that are defined by us. It is still on terms that are defined by the very people who have invented our problems or who are central to the sustenance of our problems. So for me, we will continue to have these platforms where we come together. And for as long as we do not extend them to accommodate the element of where we define the scope and the approach of engaging with the world on our own terms, then they will never be as effective as we want them to be.
But governments in Africa, can they be more entrepreneurial from a policy perspective? You know, because I know some argue that the role of government is to facilitate and give an environment where people can thrive. But can you embed this thinking in policy such that we come up with things, even if they are contrary to norms of international standards, whatever?
You see, again, what is international standard?
I'm in trouble here.
International standards, by our own conditioning, is the assumption that what is defined by the Western world is the standard that we must, as Africans, must aspire to. So for me, these platforms should actually ignore what is termed international standards, and we need to define our own standards because we are also international. To them, at least, if not to ourselves.
So I still want to know how we can integrate this sovereignty thinking in our policies such that it infiltrates and covers the whole cross-section of society. The way you articulated it, how can it be filtered down to everyone?
We need to start with the basics. And the basics is that Africans, by our own epistemology, we are spiritual. And at the moment, our spirituality has been castrated. And the approach that has been used to castrate our spirituality is that our land has been taken away from us. If you look at if you rely on conventional economics, and look at the model for newly industrialized economies, and how they managed to become to leave what is termed third world economies and become newly industrialized. One of the first things they did was to look at the land question.
That's it.
And to resolve that.
Yeah.
So for me, as Africans, we need to, you can't define your sovereignty without addressing the land question. We do not own what we call our countries. So essentially, we don't have a continent to call our own. And that's where we must start.
Wow. Okay, so, I mean, you said you do policy work. Where can we read some of the papers that you are producing, or how can we get insights from you remotely to all the listeners that are out there?
Well, I haven't been publishing a lot. I only started recently. I established a Facebook page called Vuyisile Speaks.
Vuyisile Speaks.
Vuyisile Mshudulu, yeah. Vuyisile Mshudulu Speaks.
Nice.
It's in my own name.
Nice.
Where I share my ideas. And I'm also part of an organization called the Black Power Front, where we publish a lot of information, not only by ourselves, but by, sources that are not necessarily prescribed in the formal education system, but are touching on issues and approaches that are critical to us as Africans in our quest for self-determination.
Perfect. So it's called the Vuyisile
Mshudulu
Speaks, and then the group, the Black Power
Front.
Black Power Front. Okay, so definitely if this is your cup of tea and you want to have further discourse around the idea of identity, African identity, and how we can incorporate it in all our activities, then definitely visit the Black Power Front of Vuyisile's page on Facebook. No, thank you very much. It's been nice talking to you. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you, Eza.
Okay.
Sure.